just the liquidity play in general is something that I feel like every time we talk about, or like we have a price go down for a minute, everyone forgets about the promise of liquidity in this ecosystem, how important it is, just what you're talking about. And I just wanted to highlight here that I took Richard's masterclass here, brief masterclass in LP, reminding people how powerful it is. Honestly, telegraphing a lot of just amazing stuff that can be done with price directly, especially from benevolent whales who have a lot to manipulate the market. But
I like the word procure.
Yeah, procure. I was going to say influence. I mean, again, you could take the dip catcher stance of like there is no market manipulation. Everyone just plays with the chips they have. Honestly, I think there's something to that. But anyways, I ran this through the AI the other day, and it kind of elaborated and bring out some interesting things for the whole play here. And I'll just read for a second here. So based on the information in Richard tweets, here's how the theory of PulseX liquidity and price moves could affect PulseChain if large whales decided to buy a significant amount of PLS across major trading pairs. And again, you can don't take this as like perfect language or whatever. This is kind of just AI just reading into what Richard's talking about. It could lead to a substantial increase in PLS price. It could be other assets and stuff too. According to Hart's explanation, doubling liquidity across those PLS trading pairs could call the PLS price to 4x. And this is an interesting part. So even relatively modest inflows of a few tens of millions of dollars could trigger large price spikes.
That's true. If you want to do an example, we can. Right now, we can do an example. So if there's 2 pulse in the pool against $2, that just means that 1 pulse equals $1 because there's 2 units of each, so they're equal. The only way PulseX positions can get put in is in equal amounts. Whatever the ratio the market's saying, that's the ratio that anyone can put in. Everyone's held accountable to the same standard. That's what makes up the famous X times Y equals K. So if there's 2 pulse in the pool and there's $2, that means that there's $4 in the pool, right? Because you got $2 of pulse and $2 of dollars, that's $4. If you want to buy up one of the pulse out of the pool, you have to deposit $2. So if you put in $2 more, now you have $4, and you took that 1 pulse out. So now you have $4 in the pool and 1 pulse remaining, which the change there is a 4x change. So the ratio went from 50-50 to 25-75.
And that's the piece for the arbitrage. You talked about arbitrage here too. So like, how does that affect it? Would people say that, okay, that's not right, like we need to like go arb that out, or how quickly could that take place for as far as ratios?
Let's see. He says, however, Hart cautions that the relationship is not exact, as arbitrage bots would work to eliminate major price discrepancy. Well, so what this is basically saying is, in my example where there's $2 and 2 pulse, that's not the only pool out there. There's hundreds or thousands of pools with all sorts of different coins and all sorts of different ratios. So there's actively bots at work to, when somebody pushes through a buy, that buy gets spread apart. So it doesn't just hit our 2 and 2 pool. It's also going to hit perhaps other pools as well, to give you, the buyer, the best price possible. That's what order routers do, is they try to give you as the buyer or seller the best order execution, which means it's going to go seek out all the different pools on the network and bring you back the most coins it can at the best price, while accounting for slippage. That's where that word slippage comes in. So what he's saying is smart traders would likely spread their buying pressure across multiple pairs to reduce the impact, meaning either you're going to use an order router to do it for you, or you're going to manually go and set up buys on PulseX, 9mm, 9-inch for the same pair. So I'm going to go tack each different exchange separately, or I'm going to use an order router to spread my order across to get the best deal with less work. And there's reasons why you may do one or the other. An example I could say was the other day, somebody pushed a big buy through on the Axis token on PulseX, and it hit the Axis Pulse pair on PulseX and pushed the price up like 4%. And then another buy came in, in behind them that used an order router and not the PulseX pool directly through PulseX app.pulsex.com, and the buy went through, and it was a bigger buy than the previous buy. So typically, what you'd see is a bigger price spike. But when that second buy came through, the order router pushed it all through 9mm because the price was cheaper on 9mm, and it gave you more coins for the better deal, so that there was absolutely no impact on price on the main chart from PulseX. So when you're looking at a chart, you're only looking at that particular pool. So for each pool that exists, there's a different candlestick chart. So if there's 100 pairs for a coin, there's 100 candlestick charts, and an adept person will just find the deepest ones with the most liquidity, because those typically are the ones that gets to hit the most, and gives you like the true price or the true price feed of where most of the transactions are taking place. But there are cases where if some of you idiots out there, no offense, are using just PulseX to transact, you're making a big mistake, because you're not getting the best price for you're not getting as much as you could, and you're creating discrepancies in price between pairs. So I highly encourage you that if you insist on playing with swapping coins around, use something like Piteus, like app.piteus.io, because that's going to route your order from different areas. Or use Internet Money Wallet and use its in-app swap, because it's going to give you more coins for your dollar.
And this doesn't hurt PulseX. Everything still works fine. It'll route through there if the best price is there. It's just going to give you better experience as a user. So it's not like you're not using PulseX by doing that. You may not be using the interface, but you're still using the contracts and stuff if they get routed.
Yeah, it's a good point. If you're using Piteus, it's still going to find deals on PulseX. It's not going to ignore them. It's going to look at PulseX first, probably in a lot of cases, because that's where the most liquidity is. So
how does this affect the benevolent well actions too? Like, why would he be talking about that piece? Because at face value, it's like, okay, well, if we want prices to go up and keep getting bang, bang, bang with buys, why would we want to spread it across there? Like, wouldn't the price go higher by being inefficient? Because buyers want as many coins as possible for as cheap of a price as possible. So when it says smart traders are going to spread their buying pressure across multiple pairs to reduce impact, it's basically saying, I'm a trader, I want to buy, but I want the most coins I can get, and I want to slip the price up as least as possible. So when you come in to buy, you don't want to make green candles, because otherwise you're not getting as many coins. Well, that's what this is saying. The whales want the price to go up. And then the catch-22 of that is smart market makers obviously are inclined to make the price go up, because it brings in attention and more volume and more interest. If there's not enough volatility on an asset, people get bored and they sell it off. So volatility in either direction is good, because it gives somebody something to trade to bring in more eyes, more volume, and more interest, which means sell-offs are good, and big pumps are good. Flat price action, like who wants to go trade dollars? Who wants to go trade USDC for USDT for DAI all day, every day, where you're trading for like fractions of a penny? Like, there's no gain there unless you're trading like $1 billion, right, back and forth, where you could make, like a fraction of a penny on $1 billion is still like potentially $1 million, right? But and that's the big boys game. So the more volatility, the more of a little man's game it is, and the less volatility, the more of a big man's game it is, in terms of the size of the bags that are required to make meaningful returns. What else do we have on this breakdown? Yeah, the inverse leverage part I think is pretty interesting. The liquidity acts as inverse leverage. More liquidity reduces volatility, while less liquidity amplifies price swings. I can more liquidity. Oh yeah, so the deeper, the thicker the liquidity, the less the price impact, which can be good, because if you want billionaires to get into your asset, they don't want to push the price up too hard, too fast. They want to accumulate a position first. So if there's deeper liquidity, it means that it smothers the ability for price to get volatile, move up and down. Whereas, like, if you remove liquidity, it makes it more choppy and more volatile, which gives more opportunity to the little guy.
And so it's a fine line between too much and too little. And as you'll see in coins like my coin, like the Axis chart, or some of these other ones that have a lot of volatility in them, there's huge opportunity in those swings. And the periods where the price goes flat, you'll notice like the liquidity is thicker, and the periods where the price is very bouncy is when the liquidity is less.
Why do you think he would be talking about all this stuff in detail and making all these public moves that, you know, we could see on chain, the buy? I mean, when I say he, I mean, you know, whoever controls the keys, making the buys, has the site wallet, all that stuff. Could be Richard, could be anybody, could be a company, could be whatever. But just why does all this information being publicly presented? Like, what do you think is the message for like, is he just reminding us of what could happen? You know, what we should have no expectations of, but like why make everything public? Why not?
I think he's just educating. I think he's just educating us all and reminding us of how the game's played and what to look for. So if you saw like all of the major Pulse pairs drop by 50% in liquidity overnight, if the total Pulse liquidity was like $100 million and you saw it drop to 50 million overnight, you could anticipate that, hey, there's going to be a big move coming because less liquidity, bigger price moves. But if it doubles from 50 million to 100 million, it just became like 4 times as difficult to push the price around. So think about those things. That could be part of it. I think that generally he wants people to be educated. Maybe he's also saying, hey, you know, there's a lot of liquidity right now. If you remove some of your liquidity, it's easier to move the price, for better or for worse. Or, hey, there's a lot of liquidity right now. If you add more, we can like reduce downside from sellers. It depends on the angle that you think he's trying to say, because it could be different for every player. Ultimately this just gives the user base a better foundation and education to stand on to make decisions, I guess.
There's always this battle between, you know, people yelling, "Oh, there's not enough liquidity," and then people yelling, "Oh, you know, you can think about these strategies. Oh, there's too much liquidity. The price can't move as much because it's so thick." How do you reconcile those two? Like, what is the right time to have a lot of liquidity and less liquidity, especially if we see whales out there with billions of dollars or millions of dollars that, you know, may be putting it to use? Like, when is the best time to have thick and thin liquidity?
So like you at the bottom of a range on a price chart where prices are starting to flatten out and volumes are starting to taper off, you want to see the liquidity thin, because then that means the pump back up can be bigger and faster. Whereas like after a big pump has occurred, you want to see somebody come in and add a bunch of liquidity to reduce the downside pressure. If you're a bull, if you're a bear, you have to reverse what I just said. So if you're a bear, you want to see very low liquidity at the tops of ranges so that, okay. If you're a bear and you're looking to exit and you're in something and you're looking to exit, you want that lot of liquidity up there at the top of a pump, because then you can sell into that and extract that value. If you're a bull, this is what makes market making hard, guys, is like if you're a bull, you want low liquidity at the bottom of a range where volumes are tapering off and the price is starting to go sideways so that you can get a big pump off that level. And then you want to come back in and backfill with a lot of liquidity after the pump's done so that you can get done with a round of a wave of sellers. And then after that wave of sellers is gone, you want to thin the liquidity again and pump it the next leg again, because like remember, if there's less liquidity, you can get another leg out of it, another pump higher with less economic energy input. So it's kind of like if you look at have you ever seen like a phalanx where like back in the days of the Battle of Thermopylae, and the Spartans would lock shields side by side, and then they would move up they would make a step forward, and then they would make a step forward. You could think of that as like the liquidity wall supporting the price behind where the price is at, and you'd want to have that there as a price support if you're trying to protect a range. Whereas like if you want to get the most upside potential, you actually have to remove your defense as well. So this is the thing, is like with liquidity, you have to remove your defense to go on offense. You can't have defense and offense both at play at the same time without inputting way more economic energy, unless you're using single-sided liquidity. So this, because we're using double-sided liquidity, you do have to actively add and remove liquidity before and after moves to get the desired outcome. However, by using tools like 9mm single-sided liquidity, you can buffer downside but remove all the top side sell pressure. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. But what's best for price is actually double-sided equal liquidity, because it holds all players accountable who are going to provide the liquidity, because they would have to have equal amounts of both sides of the pair, and they can't just be like a net seller who could just put over, like what happened with the Soimi token, where price went up a lot. Sami got $5 million of this coin for free, dropped into his wallet. He put up a huge sell wall. It was a $68 million sell wall to basically stop the price in its tracks and kill the movement. But he had no skin in the game on the buy side. So if there was no Uniswap V3, he would have had to put up his own Pulse liquidity to pair it with $5 million worth at the time on both sides, which held him accountable to that move. But instead, because he used 9mm single-sided, he had to be not accountable at all. He could get these coins for free and just put that there and kind of kill the project. And that's what happened, for better or for worse. I'm not throwing shade on the guy, because he probably didn't know who made the coin, what the motive was, what damage that could do to his brand. And so I understand, why you'd want to shut. If somebody made a coin about me, I wouldn't necessarily support that either, because I didn't make it, right? So I understand that angle. But that's what happens when that kind of situation occurs, is if you put too much overhead sell pressure on single-sided and you're not accountable for the other side, you have no skin in the game. You just get to this is what's the problem with early the sacrifice phases and early drops and early buy-ins, is you're basically giving these people money with them having to put very minimal skin in the game in some cases, but then they can just be a problem for the project long term and just extract.
What do you think is more bullish, seeing the liquidity being removed or being added for PulseChain at this point?
What needs to happen right now is dependent on the players that's coming in to move the price chart. So I don't really have an opinion one way or the other. I think just looking at the Pulse pair, there's the main Pulse die pair, there's over $20 million on there. And that's fine. It'll, that's a healthy amount of liquidity to support the price at these levels. And it's also appropriate, because if you saw somebody inject $20 million, it's going to 4x the price. So if somebody came in here and put $20 million in here, price would get to 0.00037, which would be a new all-time high. And if somebody were to sell $20 million, it would cut the price by 75%. Theoretically, right? Because this is just this one pool we're looking at. It would drop price to new all-time lows, but they would also have to sell somewhere in the realm of 350 to 400 billion Pulse. And it's not totally, the example doesn't totally make sense, because in this case we're just looking at one wrapped Pulse pool, and there's literally thousands of wrapped Pulse pools that you could be tapping from. So there's probably, realistically, there's probably $100 million of Pulse liquidity out there. So it kind of changes the price or the numbers I just gave you. But that's a general idea of what would happen on this particular pair, assuming this was the only pair that existed for Pulse and DAI and USD. $20 million to the upside moves price 4x. $20 million to the downside moves price minus 75%. Is that enough? Yeah, there's not very many people that have 300, 400 billion PLS. And to take that kind of risk to sell that off, that would get immediately bought back up, and they would lose their position in the game. Because you can't play the game like that, or you get left behind. There's enough hungry people that want that many coins at those prices. So if you were to sell it and to buy it up that high, you're taking so much supply off the market with that very little economic energy, that you'd probably create a higher price floor somewhere. And we'll see that happen here, where we've already seen this kind of a move happen between January 7th and January 19th, where there was $140 million of volume, and the price went up 211%. So you got a 3x on $140 million of volume. Over 50% of that was buy volume. So that means that there was about $75 million of buy volume for a 3x there. So that's kind of more in the realm of what you'd be looking for this next 3 to 4x, is probably $150, $200 million of volume in both directions.
Yeah, we saw the buys. I think the first time it became, I guess, obvious to everyone, evenly spread across in January across PulseX, Inc, Hex. 2 times. I think it was the first time in January, 2 times in February, around the same, and then 2 times in March. One was Hex only, one was Pulse only, and then what was it? Just 24 hours ago or so, we saw PulseX only. I'm just adding this up now. Is Inc next? Didn't even think about it. Like, it's funny, like how the single buys are happening now.
Yeah. I don't want to give away too much also, because I'm having these thoughts too. I don't want to give away too much of my ideas on what's going to happen. But I can say this, that PulseX and Hex are the ones that you could look to for action, because they're Hex in particular is so depressed. And I've said this before, like, for 1 year of ink yields in the farms on the ink pairs, you're making 10 times the amount you're making for a 1 year Hex stake right now. So that either tells me that the ink farms are overvalued, or the Hex price is undervalued by a factor of 10. So I think fair value on PHEX is somewhere around 10 cents, and we're just not there yet. But when that move comes, it'll probably happen pretty quickly. And on the ratio, like, it looks to me that Hex is actually starting to stabilize and go sideways. We're kind of done with that period of brand damage and, you know, EHEX versus PHEX, and that's in the history books now. So I expect that, you know, you should be looking at Hex right now, because if you acquire enough units now, and I know we're kind of getting off the topic of liquidity, but I think this is important. If you're acquiring Hex now and you get enough units at a penny, and then let's say theoretically this whole liquidity system builds up into the billions of dollars, or even $1 trillion, imagine that, you're going to have endless liquidity to sell into as a Hex staker. And the only ones that would have gotten rewarded are the guys that got their Hex today, right? The guys that got it now. Because by the time it's at 10 and 20 cents, you're going to get like 90% less coins for your dollar. And it's just going to be so hard to catch up to the guys that saw this coming early. And I think Storyteller on Twitter talks a lot about, you know, if you can read the blockchain and you can see the bigger picture, that there's moves and battle shifts being put into position that's really setting up to look really good for Hex this cycle. You know, and I wish everybody could just see and know that.